So here we are live on both Facebook and YouTube for the first time. I'm Bonnie Wagner Stafford from Ingenium Books, and super happy to be here with Jamie Sussel Turner, who is an author. And what we're going to talk about today, before I get into letting Jamie tell us a little bit about herself, but we're talking today about how to reduce the stress around writing your book. So, in these times, pandemic, isolation, quarantine, all that goes along with that, there's lots of stress to go around. But even when that isn't the circumstance in our lives, writing a book, like any big project, can be quite a stressful thing. So we'll start talking about that in a minute. But Jamie, you're somewhat of an expert on stress, I would say, right?
Well, Bonnie, hey, first, thanks for having me today. And hi, everybody out there. I hope there's some people out there. It's weird, you don't know.
No, you don't know, really.
Right? If not, you and I will have a good conversation. So I call myself the less stress coach. And I have been working on stress as I look back. I didn't even realize this at first, but since I was a kid, I was a really stressed out kid. And when I tell people that, they're kind of surprised. But my stress would come out in, like, my face would turn bright red when I was called on in class. I would get all these different kinds of skin rashes. I even had a skin rash in 5th grade on the back of my legs that no one else could sit in the chair I was sitting in. You know how mortifying that was as a 5th grader?
Oh my goodness.
And as I look back, I can see all of it was induced by stress. So I've been really dealing with stress, like, on the inside, internally, and it didn't always show to the rest of the world, but I felt it. So that's been my story. And then in 2001, I was diagnosed with early stage breast cancer, and I was a workaholic at that time. And that was the first time I decided maybe I should try and get better at how I handle stress. That was when it first started to kind of speak to me. And I've been on that mission since then.
So you're a coach as well, right? So
Yes.
You work with other people. Tell me a little bit. Tell me a little bit about that side of you and your business.
Yes. So I'm a former school principal, and I left public education in 2009 and started my coaching business. And as coaches, they tell you to kind of have a niche, which you may think of as an author. And in the work that you do, you have a niche in nonfiction books. Mm-hmm. But I just kind of took whoever wanted to work with me when I was a coach. And it turned out that I ended up attracting a lot of highly stressed leaders, mostly small business owners and individuals as well. So I came to realize when I wrote my first book, Less Stressed Business, that I was really helpful. I was really good at helping my clients feel calmer. They all told me, I have so much less stress since we've been working together. And I did not realize that was, like a superpower that I have.
Right. So what is it about stress that maybe I should say, what isn't it about stress? But how does stress get in the way of us being our best selves?
Well, it's kind of tricky because some stress does help us be our best selves. So even for this interview today, I could feel like some energy rising. And if I became overly stressed about it, then I would have what's called an amygdala hijack, where my brain would be overtaken by the stress by a flood of cortisol, and I wouldn't be as articulate or able to think clearly. But that little bit of stress, when I can think about it as something that energizes me to be my best, I can get it working for me rather than against me. So there's even a name for that. Good stress is called eustress, EUSTRESS. And then the bad stress is distress. So it's when we have that chronic stress that it's not good for our health. But some stress can be very positive. Right.
And it's determining how you respond. First of all, how you recognize which type of stress it is, and then how you respond. So you've written and published 2 books. The first one is Less Stress Business. And the second one is the one that I'm more familiar with, working with you a little bit on Less Stressed Life, on that manuscript when you were developing that. Yes. Before we get into the tips for authors who might be trying to manage stress as they're writing their books. And you've got some great tips. So we're, coming up with that in a moment. But tell me a little bit about the story behind Less Stress Life. So that was your second book. Tell me about how that came about.
Well, I didn't really plan to write a second book at all. It was not even on my radar. And actually, I was sitting right in this very chair in my office where I have a view of a river, which is just magnificent, right out my window here. And I was just sitting here back in 2017, and I thought, gosh, I've been working on my stress since 2001, and I still feel more stress than I would like to feel. And I think it is getting in the way of how I'm just living my life. And it's kind of robbing me of some joy in my life by worrying and feeling stressed at times. And I thought to myself, what could I do to get better at stress? So in that moment, like right in that instant, I gave myself a challenge. I said, I'm going to take 1 year. I'm going to devote 1 year of my life to getting better at stress. And during this time, I'm going to look for a moment of stress every single day. Actually set out in the morning to find a moment of stress, and then while I'm
only one moment,
at least one, and it was not hard to find, and then while I'm in the moment to kind of say to myself, is there a way I could think differently in this moment? Because sometimes our stress is in our thinking. Or is there a way I could behave differently in this moment to get my stress working for me rather than against me? And I started that very day, and it was not hard to find the stress. And then the other thing I decided to do was to keep a journal about those moments. And I'm not really a journaling kind of person, not in terms of like, I don't write reams of writing. I'm more of a concise writer rather than someone who writes volumes. That's my style. So I would like keep a list of, what happened today, what the stress was today. And then I would look back and I could discover all these patterns about my stress. So at this point, I hadn't even thought about writing a book. I just was trying to get better at stress for myself.
So where did the book idea come from?
Well, I happened to be at a writing workshop with a local woman, Gay Edelman. I got to give her a shout out. She's a local writing coach who has
Gay.
Yeah, she's fantastic. She has a great track record as being a professional editor for women's magazines, and she knows the self-help genre really well. And I happened to be with some of my friends in a writing workshop, and there were, I don't know, like 9 of us seated around a big, large table. And she said, okay, go around and tell us what you're writing these days. And even though I'm a blogger and I write a blog regularly, I just kind of took a deep breath and thought, okay, I think this is a safe space. I'm with friends. Let me just tell them what I'm doing about stress. And so I kind of very gently put it out there. And I'll never forget Gay's response. She said, that is a brilliant idea. Keep going. If she had not said that, I don't know how long I would have sustained it, honestly. And so then I started to think that some of those stories could become a book, but it wasn't my initial idea. Both of my books, I did not set out to write a book. They're kind of accidental books.
It's kind of fun. But so you have learned quite a bit about the process of writing a book.
Yes.
Having gone through 2. And after you were finished working with us and you had published your second book, you very kindly provided us with a guest blog talking about how to reduce stress when you're writing a book. So let's talk about and you gave us 5 tips. So for anybody, and these are beyond the stress that comes from, oh my God, how big is it got to be? How long does it have to be? Those are some of the things that contribute to the stress. But why don't you start by giving us your first tip? And
sure.
There are 5, but
there are 5.
Yeah.
Tip number 1 is ditch the deadline. So some people do really well with deadlines. It kind of goes back to getting your stress working for you. So thinking about whether you're a deadline kind of writer or not, I am not. So it did not serve me to have a single deadline with either of my books to say, oh, I want to have this done by this date. That just put so much pressure on me, and there was no reason for it. So I think it's getting in touch with yourself and knowing, does a deadline work for you or not? If it works for you, then you want to use a deadline. But for me, it just ratcheted up my stress and was not good. It didn't produce good writing. It was kind of,
Right.
the antithesis to good writing.
And that's a challenge for me because I spent 15 years as a reporter where it's all about deadlines. It's the go and do the research and write the story and do your live hit for the noon news, and then go and, do a rewrite of the story and do it be ready for the 5 o'clock, and then do another one for 6. And then you got to do another rewrite. It's like everything is deadline driven. So I was trained to do that deadline oriented. And then I'm finding that it's taken me years to get to a space where I have a little bit of a healthier relationship with deadlines. Because if I'm always driving to a deadline, it's not just the stress I feel, but I get exhausted very, 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 very quickly. So that's fantastic advice to take a look at what those deadlines are. Are they self-imposed, and are they working for you or not?
Yes. And
okay, tip number 2.
Is it helping you? I could never have done that job with those deadlines, honestly.
Yeah.
When I started my blog 10 years ago, I almost didn't start the blog because I feared that I'd feel like pressured to write something every week. And then it occurred to me, I could have like a whole lot of blogs all written and ready to go before I go live. So that's how I overcame that stress.
Oh, good. So you're having things kind of all done in advance. All right.
It's like knowing yourself.
Yeah. This leads right into tip number 2.
Yes. Tip number 2 is know your triggers. So it's knowing, whether it's a deadline or it can be other triggers as well. For me, comparisons are big triggers, like feeling not worthy because writing doesn't come naturally to me. And I've really struggled. I was more of a math person growing up. I was not a writer at all. And so like before my first book came out, Brene Brown's latest book had just come out. I forget which one it was. And I read all her books. And I was reading her book at the same time I was finishing my book. And I was thinking, I'm not as good as Brene Brown. I can't publish this book.
Yeah.
I don't have all the research she has. I had this moment of terror, like I can't move forward. And thankfully I have 2 adult sons, and I shared this with one of my sons, my son Adam, and he also had read Brene, and he said, Mom, she is really wordy. And she goes on and on before she makes her point. And some people don't like that. They just want to get in, get the point, and get out. And you're really good at that. So he really helped talk me down off that ledge.
Yeah. Well, that's really good advice. The comparison, what do we call that? A rabbit hole.
Yeah, knowing what triggers you as a writer.
Yeah.
So I know for me, but I think some of the listeners out there have other kinds of triggers. But that and like negative self-talk, like, who am I to write this book? And, that kind of stuff, just to catch myself in the moment. Again, it helps with that idea that I did with my 1-year challenge, is catching myself and spotting that stress.
Right.
And noticing that, hold on a second, I am not speaking nicely to myself right now about this. Is this true even? Why can't I be the one to tell this story?
Yeah, that makes sense. And one of the triggers that the authors that we work with at Ingenium Books often talk about, not in the way of saying, hey, this is my stress trigger, but some of the challenges, or one of the challenges that comes up quite often is a sense of overwhelm with the size of the project. Oh my God, I have this idea, but I have no idea how to get from here to there. And you mean I have to write how many words? And how long is it going to take me? So that sheer size of the undertaking can often be a stress trigger. So if that is something that is a stress trigger, obviously, if we're working together, then we figure out ways to make bite-sized bits of it. And if you're doing, and if you're doing this on your own, how can you break that up so that it's kind of, one task at a time while you keep an eye on the end goal and the big picture. But there's lots.
Can I just add one more trigger?
Yeah.
For me, feedback was another really scary trigger, because I would check out other books online and see the kind of comments that readers had left. And some of them were just scathing and nasty and awful. And this happened with my first book. I almost didn't publish it because I just didn't want to get that kind of feedback from people. I had to really work myself to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's another excellent point. And one of the authors whose book we published late last year, Yvonne Caputo, with Flying with Dad, that was definitely one of her stress triggers. And together we worked out a system where instead of me sending her back marked up manuscript, I would send it clean. And I said, I have the marked up file. If you want to see it, you can see it. But that seemed to work for her. She was able to then not get totally stressed out about the, because I mean, goodness, those red lines, you're doing track changes in Word. It's a fantastic function, but
yeah.
Yeah, can you leave it looking so that is a way to to think about that. Your next tip number 3.
Yeah, tip number 3 is share with care. And
I've frozen up. I don't know if you're frozen. Oh, there you are.
Oh. All right, am I good? So I kind of talked about that before when I was bravely sharing in that writing group.
You're good. Yeah, it's a little bit breaking up. I don't know if it's my end or your end.
Okay. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Okay. I see Technology. Me fine. You're a little pixelated, but something's up. So it's deciding who to share it with and knowing which people in your world will support you, and at what point do you really want critical feedback, and to be specific when you do share with someone. Whoops. I completely just lost you. Oh, that was weird.
I'm back.
Okay.
I see you.
So towards the end of my process with Less Stress Life, I have 2 very close friends who have MFAs in creative nonfiction.
Right.
So I bravely sent them the manuscript and asked them for specific feedback about the book. So I think when you're sharing, be specific what you want from the person you're sharing with. And it was because of both of them, Bonnie, that I reached out to you, because these 2 women don't know each other. And they each told me my book needed more structure. And boy, was I resistant to that. Because more structure meant I was going to have to do more work. And I kind of felt done.
Yeah.
But I trusted both of them and valued their opinion. A shout out to Helen and Paula. Thank you very much. And so because of them, I thought, who could help me with this? And that's how I ended up with you to help with a structural review of my book. And thank you. I'm so grateful that you helped me see a way to restructure the book, and it made it so much better. So thank you, Bonnie.
Well, you're welcome. Anything. Happy to help. And it's a great book. I loved working on your book. So number 4 tip.
Number 4 is build in a cushion of time. So time can be a huge stress factor. Actually, when I did my 1-year challenge, I found time was my biggest stress factor of anything. And I really didn't even know that before I started. Like, for example, if you're going to throw yourself a book launch party, make sure your books are going to be in your hands in time, and work backwards and give yourself way more time than you need. I now live my life like I was on this call before you were today, because I get every place 5 or 10 minutes early, and that's just how I live my life now. And I found I can just be calmer when I do that. So, my first book, I had a lot more stress because I wanted to get it published by a certain date. And these were all self-imposed deadlines that, looking back, were not important at all. And I created a lot of stress by having them. So I think build in extra time for each step of this process is going to take longer than you think. So, for example, when my book got converted to an ebook, there were some problems that had to go back and be fixed, and it didn't happen all overnight. Everything is going to take a little longer than you think. So build in a cushion of time.
That makes total sense. And my own assessment and relationship with time, it's changing the older I get. Funny how that happens. But when I was younger, I used to very much I remember in my 20s going on a vacation to Hawaii with my sister. And of course, we needed to stay, at the bar until the very last minute on our for our plane ride home. And so we were racing through the airport,
Right.
and we just managed to squeeze on the plane. We were the last ones on, the doors closed right behind us. Whew. And, I just can't do that anymore. I also like to get to the airport early and, those kinds of
Some
things.
people like that. So
I certainly did, yeah.
My husband and I are very different in that way. If he's running to the gate, he feels like he left just the right amount of time.
Right, yeah.
Right? And I need to get there at least a half an hour or more to sit and read a book and chill and everything before I get on the plane. And luckily he defers to me because I'm not too much fun to be around when I'm stressed about getting to the airport.
Yeah, exactly.
So, again, it's one of those things you have to know whether that's helping you or not.
Yeah. So anybody who happened to be joining us partway through here, just a reminder that we're talking with Jamie Sussel Turner, the author of Less Stress Life and her first book, Less Stress Business. And we're talking specifically about tips tips for reducing stress while you're writing your book. So we've gone through the first 4 tips. Your 5th tip is what?
Tip number 5 is get professional help, which I talked about, just a few minutes ago, how helpful you were to me, Bonnie. And I worked with other people too. I had a professional copy editor, cover designer, interior layout, all of those things. I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And I knew going into this, even though I self-published, I wanted my book to be as good or better than all the other books on the Barnes & Noble in the Barnes & Noble self-help section.
Yeah.
I didn't want anyone to pick up my book and say, oh, this is a self-published book. I wanted it to be a quality book. So I needed professionals. So I think it's identifying what you can do well and where you need help.
Right. That's excellent advice. So a summary of the 5 tips to reduce stress when you're writing your book: ditch deadlines, know your stress triggers, share with care, build a cushion of time because everything is going to take longer than you expect, and get professional help. Those are fantastic tips. Now, I want to put a link in here for folks to find your book. Here we are. If people want to go and find your book, I've just added a link. And so that's taking a little while to upload, but it's going, which is good. Now, just in the last few minutes, so you recently did a promotion. It was right at the beginning of the COVID-19 kind of lockdown experience, and perfect book for the perfect time. I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about, because one of the things that stresses authors out is after they've written is, oh my goodness, how do they make sure people know about the book, and whether it's about sales or helping people or whatever it is. But so you actually attained a pretty good, I forget what the rank was.
Yes,
tell me what
ranking. Well, let me go back to the beginning and say, because my book is about stress, and people are so stressed right now with the virus, and all the different aspects of it, financial stress, health stress, and everything. I felt like, I didn't set out to write a book to make money. That was not my why. And I think authors really need to know, and I know you help them with that, why they're writing the book and who the audience was. And since making money wasn't my main motivator for writing the book, my reason for writing the book is to help other people learn how to have less stress the way I have. So I decided at the start of all of this to actually make my Kindle book free for 1 week. And Amazon KDP allows you to do that one time in 90 days. Right. So if this is still going on, I plan to do it again in 90 days. I think this was maybe about 5 weeks ago that I made the offer. And I had over 1,000 downloads of my book. And I reached the ranking of number 2. Darn, I didn't make number 1, but number 2 in stress management. And I just know it got my book into the hands, hopefully, of a lot of people who really needed it and could learn and, feel calmer during this very stressful time. So that was kind of my give back. Actually, I have a free webinar coming up next Monday
Oh,
And yeah, so, and that's on stress. It's kind of, I've turned my book into a workshop. So it's a workshop. So people could go to my Facebook page. I'll be putting it up there. And I'll probably put it on Twitter also. So they could kind of look at my
great.
social media to find it if they're interested. And it'll be an hour-long workshop on how to transform your stress into an ally.
Oh, now, we've got a few minutes left, but we didn't really get into this too much at the beginning. Do you think that there is a link between the stress that you found yourself living with and your health issues?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, Bonnie, and you just disappeared. Okay, there you go, you're back. There's no definitive proof that my cancer, I've had 3 cancer diagnoses, and there's no definitive proof that they had anything to do with stress. But I have to say, especially my first diagnosis, it felt like it had to do with my workaholism and my stress. And I was newly into the job as a school principal for a couple of years, and that job had completely overtaken my life. And that's what prompted me to get better at stress. But breast cancer is not one of those cancers that's necessarily connected, but there's
Right.
the way we cope with stress can have a fallout. For example, like I didn't have very good eating habits during those years, and I ate too much candy, and I didn't sleep enough, and I kind of fell off my normal exercise routine. So all of those things could have contributed, but I don't know for sure, and I really don't want to blame myself for getting cancer, right? So
No.
chronic stress can have some dire health consequences for sure.
Yeah, but if I mean, to flip that on its head, you could say, or could you say, rather phrasing it as a question, but that your cancer diagnoses, whether it's the first, second, or third, gave you the impetus to take a look at stress.
Oh, completely. Yes, that's 100% true.
Yeah. So it's given you the purpose in sharing these great tips, whether it's for writers or for people in their business, right, or just in life. So we are. I don't know. The clock. Yes, the clock has. I was looking, where did it go? The clock is.
This went way too fast this time.
I know it does. But so Less Stress Life, people can find it either on the Ingenium Books website, and I did put a link in the chat to where they can follow to get your book on Amazon. Is it available elsewhere other than Amazon?
I think it's also on Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
In my area, in local bookstores.
Right. Perfect. And your area is?
I'm in New Jersey at the beach.
Perfect. Okay.
In a town called Seabright. Yes. Where it's raining right now, but.
Great. Well, it'll change to sunshine soon. And then we had all kinds of things that I wanted to chat with you about, because you've got all kinds of interesting things in your background that we just didn't get. So we'll have you back another time where we'll talk about more of that stuff. But Less Stress Life, available on Amazon. You can find more about Jamie on the Ingenium Books website under ingeniumbooks.com, and then authors work, and then authors, and Jamie Sussel Turner's down there, and your own site. Jamie Sussel Turner.
My site is lessstresscoach.com.
Thank you. lessstresscoach.com.
And there's all kinds of stuff. You can see videos and all kinds of stuff on that site.
Perfect. And you're doing lots of interviews and blogs and these video calls. And so it's fantastic to see you all over social media.
I'm enjoying it all. Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Bonnie,
joining us, Jamie. You're welcome. And we have, I think that's what we set out to deliver on today. So we'll wrap that up and call it a day.
Wish all the writers out there good luck, and feel free to reach out to me if I can support you in any way. Just if you need someone to talk to, just for fun, I'm here. So don't hesitate.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jamie.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. All right. Bye-bye.